Did you come for a story? I've got plenty, but mine died with me. What I can let you know is how I and others came to be here in the Barrie Union Cemetery, and I've been dying to tell someone. Now don't listen to what anyone else might say about me, as if I was the local busybody or gossip. It's not my fault that my life ended rather early, in my prime, and that I ended up here, where there's not much to do and no one to talk to. I like to keep up to date on all things going on around the cemetery, and I know plenty about my neighbors. To keep myself out of trouble, though, I'll let them tell their own stories. The Union Cemetery was opened in 1879. Before that, there were several small cemeteries and burial grounds in Barrie, and of course, church graveyards, but they were eventually closed. The headstones were moved, and all the remains were reinterred. We hope. As you gaze around this peaceful park, you'll see that all the graves face the east. This is a very old custom. Some say it originated with the pagan sun worshippers, but it is more likely due to the Christians who believe the final call to judgment will come from the east. Please take a moment to appreciate the many styles of headstones and tombs surrounding us. Around the 1840s, obelisk-shaped stones started showing up during a period of renewed interest in Egyptian culture. They also took up less room, so they could be placed in small areas. Obelisks certainly cost less than the large sculpted monuments as well. Table stones, which are just like a table on a grave, are rather rare. Families would use them for picnics while they visited their loved ones. When you see a half-carved headstone, it's not because the monument maker got fed up and quit partway through the job. It's supposed to represent the transition from life into death. There's also the notion that while we may accomplish many things during our time on Earth, we have even more to learn and do in the afterlife. You'll notice as we make our way through the cemetery that the headstones are made from different materials. The wealthy families used marble and granite, while the middle and lower class families used wood, lime, and sandstone, which were also considered softer and easier to carve. I suppose I should send you on your way now, as I see the judge is looking a little impatient.
Oh my word. I wasn't expecting to see anyone today, but this is just the most wonderful surprise. Please excuse the mess. We had a rather unfortunate weather event a few months ago, and it took an awful toll on the trees in this vicinity. I'd clear it up myself, but, well, you understand. I've been a fortunate man, as perhaps you can tell by this finely crafted tombstone. It was placed here by my friends and family after I passed away, and I'm eternally grateful for their kindness. On the day of my birth, in December 1815, few would have predicted that my resting place would be marked by a monument so grand. My family had a long history in County Wexford, Ireland, and I was born there in a time of great upheaval. By 1829, my parents had decided that a change was in order, and we came to this great land. We were involved in homesteading near Caledon during our earliest years here. But education was important to my parents, and my mother in particular was keen to see me, her only surviving son, go into one profession or another. Law was decided upon, and I soon found myself working as a law student for Mr. James Edward Small of Toronto. Mr. Small was a brilliant but busy man, and he regularly tasked me with attending to his legal cases while I was attempting to keep up with my studies. At the same time, Upper Canada began to experience an upheaval of its own, and a nasty but short-lived rebellion ensued. I joined one of the small local militias and found myself in the thick of the skirmishes at Gallows Hill and Montgomery's Tavern. In the aftermath, Mr. Small took on no less than 50 clients, many of whom were charged with treason. As soon as I was called to the bar, Mr. Small rewarded me with a partnership, if you want to call it that. Once I was able to take on full caseloads, he largely stepped away from the law office to concentrate on his political aspirations. I collapsed. Please remember that I was only 23 years of age at the time, and the burden of running a legal firm, essentially alone, was a heavy one to bear. The small Gowan partnership also ended there, but don't lament my plight, as it turned out to be a most fortuitous thing indeed. Mr. Small sent me on my way with a recommendation, one that changed the course of my life. He suggested to his associate, lawyer and MLA Robert Baldwin, that I might be a good candidate for a judgeship in the newly formed county of Simcoe, and here I am. In 1843, accompanied by my parents and my sister Anne, I travelled to Barrie and petitioned for land just east of that village. We were fortunate enough to obtain some nice property in the area, with high hills and fantastic views of Kempenfelt Bay. We carved out for ourselves an enclave of sorts, bordered by streets that came to be known as Duckworth, Highland, St. Vincent, and the bay itself. That same year, I officiated as my sister Susan of Toronto married banker John Strahy. They soon joined us in our family neighbourhood in Barrie. Anne wed John Arda, son of esteemed clergyman Samuel Arda of Shanty Bay. I married Reverend Arda's daughter, Hannah, soon after that. Yes, if you've done some calculations, you'll note that I was appointed to the position of judge of the Judicial District of Simcoe at the tender age of 28 years. This appointment came just 3 years after I'd passed the bar. Naturally, I immediately got to work and began to organise all the necessary courts and institutions required for a well-functioning municipality, a task that occupied me for about 3 years in all. My work was not done there, no, not by a long shot. I remained on the judge's bench for 40 years after that, and then retired, though that may not be the proper word to describe my life thereafter. Following a nice holiday in Europe, Anna and I returned to learn that I'd been called to the Senate and created a QC in my absence. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a most thrilling and humbling experience. How many men are called to be an advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada? I was privileged to fill that role for the new Prime Minister. In fact, our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald. I'm not certain that I favour your modern term workaholic, but I may have been such a man, as I could never seem to decline an invitation to assist in any kind of judicial project, commission, board membership or committee. In 1907, I was an old man. This I knew, but the desire to keep working was still present. So I kept going and attended my regular Senate meetings until later that year. Anna and I had celebrated our golden wedding anniversary in 1903, and I was knighted in the year of our Lord 1905. The year 1905 was also the year that I lost my dear lady, and the world then lost some of its brightness for me. I celebrated my last birthday, my 93rd, in December 1908. A steady stream of well-wishers, cards and telegrams reached me at my home, Ardraven, and I greatly appreciated the sentiments. Good health continued to follow me until the early days of March 1909, when I suffered a sudden fainting spell. My close friends told me that I'd soon be up and around again, but I knew better. And so, I slipped away from this world in the early morning hours of March 18th, 1909. I left Ardraven for the last time at 2 p.m. on the following Saturday and was conveyed here to this final resting place, the Arda Gowan Vault that you see before you. I'm honoured by your visit today, and I encourage you to call on some of my neighbours who will have interesting stories of their own to tell.
Have you ever stopped to examine the carvings on some of the older stones? Many are quite worn by time, but if you look closely, you'll see symbols everywhere, and they have special meaning. A broken flower or a tree symbolizes a life cut short. The lily is a symbol of purity, chastity, and innocence. It was a popular funeral flower in Victorian times, symbolizing the returning of the soul to innocence at the time of death. Daffodils on gravestones symbolize rebirth, new beginnings, and hope. Laurel, especially when fashioned in the shape of a wreath, can represent victory, distinction, eternity, or immortality. A handshake carving can reflect the clasped hands of a couple to be reunited in death. If you see a hand with a finger pointing up, it is the hope of heaven. But if you see a hand with a finger pointing down, It's supposed to be God reaching for the soul in the event of an unexpected death. You may also see a dove, which is a Christian symbol of love and peace. Books on gravestones are a little trickier. Maybe it's a Bible or the Book of Life, where God records the deeds of every person, and the person buried there lived a righteous life. Sometimes a book means the person was a scholar or knowledgeable, like a teacher or librarian. Crosses mean faith, and a crown is a Christian symbol of the soul's ascension into heaven. An hourglass on its side is time stopping for the dead.
Hello, my friend. Welcome. I had an idea you might be stopping by today. It's good that you arrived on this day, as I haven't much on my calendar, and it would have been a pity if you came when I was otherwise occupied and couldn't meet with you. You chose a good day for a stroll around this neighborhood. Lovely area, is it not? I've resided here for close to 150 years now. It may surprise you to know that I have had 2 final resting places, with this one being the second. The Wesleyan Church, of which I was a parishioner, had its own small graveyard, in which I was interred after my passing in 1874. It was located just to the east of the present-day courthouse. The burying ground was closed when Barrie Union Cemetery opened in 1879, and my remains were conveyed to this place afterward. I would venture to say that I had an interesting life. My life began far away from here on a farm near the village of Catawissa, Pennsylvania in 1799. My parents came from elsewhere in America, and each had some notable ancestors, which include a Mayflower passenger on one side and a reported indentured servant on the other. When the American Revolution came along, we were on the move once again. My father possessed some skills that became crucial to the success of our family in our new home country, then called Upper Canada. He was a master land surveyor in a place that was desperately in need of such people. My brother Samuel and I worked at his side, I as an apprentice land surveyor, and Samuel as a woodsman. What a team we made, mapping the thick woods and blazing trails, wading through the deep snow into the muddy springtime and through the near insufferable summer heat with its hordes of mosquitoes. This work brought us to what was to become the county of Simcoe. When next you pass an old farmhouse in Innisfil or West Gwillimbury Township, spare a thought for us, as it was Lount men who made the early settlement of these places possible. Samuel and I were like night and day. Certainly we were close brothers, but our temperaments and aspirations were polar opposites, and we always knew that our paths in life would diverge, but not to the degree that they did. In 1826, I had the great fortune to be offered a job that put my land surveying experience to use and allowed me to largely leave the hardships of the swamps and woods of this region behind. I was created the first registrar of land deeds in the developing county. Did you know that Samuel was first offered that position? Yes, it's true, but he believed that I was better fitted than he for the job. I scarcely want to say what became of my generous brother, but I'm quite sure you read about his fate at some point. Dear Samuel was a blacksmith and a farmer, a storekeeper one time, and later involved himself in politics, which was the beginning of his downfall. The inner workings of the government machine seemed rather corrupt and unfair to my brother, and he became disillusioned with it all. Samuel joined a small group of similarly minded men who, in 1837, wanted to force a change in the Upper Canada government. A short rebellion ensued, and 2 very regrettable deaths occurred, and what once felt like a form of protest turned into a manhunt for the rebels, of which Samuel was one. Samuel was 46 years old and a married father of 4 when he was convicted of treason and died at the end of a hangman's noose on April 12, 1838. Samuel, too, was buried twice. He was first buried in a potter's field, but 21 years later, William Lyon Mackenzie, the man who instigated the failed rebellion in the first place, and some of Samuel's 6 sons, carried Samuel's remains to the Toronto Necropolis Cemetery themselves. Let me now turn away from this dark subject. We Lounts are not all about hardship and death, We lived and thrived and left many successful descendants on this earth. Like Samuel, I had a large family, which also included 6 sons. You'll find among that generation a doctor, a magistrate, several lawyers, and an assistant registrar, to name just a few. As you've traveled this far, I suggest that you may want to have a look at a nearby home, which is known locally as the Lount Castle. This grand home, built in the Second Empire style, was constructed for my son William in 1877. It once stood alone on a knoll with a splendid view, but is now addressed as 25 Valley Drive and is surrounded by a comfortable neighborhood. As for myself, I preferred a simple life of family, church, work, and community service. The well-meaning friends that I made during my fortunate life often did their best to suggest I would make an ideal candidate for political office, something that I declined politely but emphatically. You can imagine how I came to be wary of politics in general. As I saw it, there were plenty of ways in which I could help my fellow citizens without standing for any election. I thank you for your visit today. I enjoy a good chinwag, but the chances for those are few and far between these days. I would be honored if you suggest to your friends that old George Lount is happily receiving guests at almost any time of the day.
My goodness, how the epitaphs on the headstones have changed with time. Once it was fashionable to have a few lines of scripture or a bit of poetry inscribed on the stone. Some even told how the person passed. The Victorians loved elaborate tributes and would often speak of the dead's virtues. But as the years have gone by, the sentiments became simpler, just a few words expressing love or grief.
I'm over here, dear. Don't go away. I'll be right there. Goodness! I tend to become rather distracted when I get my eye on some gardening that needs to be done. I completely lose track of time when I'm weeding or deadheading the flowers. Truthfully, I shouldn't be doing any of this at all, but I can't help myself, as I have always loved gardening. One of these days, the cemetery maintenance people are going to get quite a shock when they find out what I've been up to. I dearly wish I had a cup of tea to offer you, as I could certainly use one myself. No biscuits or cakes either. What a pity. I will never get used to greeting visitors in this place, my most recent home. It's a wonder that anyone bothers to call on me at all. My name is Amy Bird, and I am very pleased to meet you. There was a time when I imagined that my remains would be buried somewhere in China. I was born as Amwa Chun in the Chinese province of Guangdong in 1841, just before Hong Kong was ceded to Britain. So much chaos and hostility came to my birthplace, and I grew up fearing that I might die at any time through war, famine, or disease. When I was a young woman, conditions became so dangerous that the British Army was forced to evacuate women and children from the besieged city of Canton, and I was among that number. I was not accustomed to feeling safe, so it took some time before I believed that peace might again come into my life. If it was not for a certain young army officer, I don't know what would have become of me. Dear, sweet Sherman, lost to me too soon, but reunited here for these last 100 years and more, saved my life. We met in 1857 and were married in 1859. In another time and place, this would have been so simple, just another boy meets girl story with a fairy tale ending. You must understand, my dear, that for an English army officer to marry a Chinese woman was not the done thing at that time. Nevertheless, Shearman persevered. After our first 2 children were born, I was baptized into the Anglican Church, which very much pleased my father-in-law, Reverend Godfrey Bird. Shearman eventually resigned his military commission and was appointed Surveyor General of Hong Kong. 3 more little ones were born to us in Hong Kong, but soon we began to make plans for a life elsewhere, with England being our preferred destination. It seemed to be the natural next step for us. In 1867, we arrived in England, and I encountered an entirely new world. For 10 months, we resided in the manse of St. Stephen's Church in Great Wigborough, Essex, where Shearman's father was rector for 47 years. In and out, like a great parade, came the families of Shearman's 14 siblings. Were they calling to greet their dear brother, or to have a good look at this unusual bride of his? We acquired a place of our own at nearby Donleyland, and our little Helen was born there in the autumn of 1868. That was 7 babes for us, if you're counting. We had love, we had money, and we had a comfortable home. But there was something that we could not seem to overcome, and that was Shearman's poor health. Even as a lad, his school records reflect a young boy who caught every germ that passed his way: chickenpox at a year old, whooping cough at 4, and measles at 15. My Shearman was perpetually ill. In those days, a change of air was the most likely cure recommended by physicians. So the boxes and trunks, so recently unpacked, were once again stuffed full of our belongings. Off to Canada we went. Our destination, as you have no doubt guessed, was the town of Barrie. At first, we lived in a small rented house, but Shearman dove immediately into the designing and building of our family home at the corner of Sophia and Peel Streets. At the same time, he was building his own surveying and architectural business. He had no shortage of work, as this town was rapidly growing and was regularly experiencing destructive fires, after which new buildings were needed. Sans souci. That's what we called our family home. It means carefree. But we were not carefree. My Shearman, such a good father and provider, was sacrificing his health daily for us, and I could see that. Just around the corner from Sans Souci, the magnificent St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church, constructed from Shearman's plans, was nearing completion. It was late in the year 1872, and it was too convenient a distance for Shearman not to walk. And walk he did, often several times a day, to check on the project. One day, he took a fall. A 35-year-old man with a stronger constitution would have quickly recovered, but bless his poor dear heart, my Shearman did not rebound. He slowly declined until pneumonia set in, and he was taken from us on January 27th, 1873. After he was laid to rest in the burying grounds of the old Anglican church, I got to work raising our 8 children. The elder ones were sent to England, where they received their education, and I kept the younger ones close to me. Sometime after 1879, the remains of my beloved were taken to Barrie Union Cemetery, and I visited this place many times before arriving here myself. 50 years passed, and then, in September 1923, I suffered a series of strokes which carried me away from my children and grandchildren, but reunited me here with Shearman. Enjoy the rest of your walk. Do come back again. I wouldn't mind at all if you brought some tea the next time you come calling, and perhaps a small pair of secateurs, which would be extraordinarily handy as well.
Aha! I did hear rumors of possible visitors today, but I was rather disinclined to believe them. What? At this place? That's what I thought to myself, but here you are, and I've never been happier to be proven wrong. Delighted to see you. May I ask you this? What do you think of the surroundings here? Certainly it is a well-kept park, with its towering trees and ornamental shrubbery, a definite beauty spot in our town, but I must confess that I don't really want to be here. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Nobody wants to be in a cemetery, and everybody wishes that they had more time above the neatly trimmed grass that you see here. There were so many more things that I had wished to accomplish, and was right on the verge of doing so when my life was suddenly over. You see, I was a military man, born into a military family who had fought under the Duke of Wellington and seen action at Waterloo. It was natural that I join such institutions at an early age, pick up a rifle, and learn to shoot, and carry my kit from one camp to another. It was a calling and a community service. I had a watchmaking business on Dunlop Street, and it did very well. Yet I found myself daydreaming of giving up that successful pursuit in favor of something more suited to the soldier's blood that ran in my veins. By 1882, I was living very well indeed. My dear wife, Sophia, had given me 2 strong sons, and we were all residing in Three Oaks, a Gothic revival house of which we were very proud. I was 50 years of age and still filled with vigor and energy, and yet envisioning a bigger purpose for my career path. Good things come to those who wait. I believe that is the popular saying. In early February of 1882, my wait was over. I thanked God and danced around the parlor with Sophia after learning of my appointment as a superintendent of the Northwest Mounted Police. All of my training and all of my experience as lieutenant colonel of the 35th Battalion of the Simcoe Foresters had led me to this day. In the Northwest, which then consisted of the prairie lands and the territories, European settlers were daily flowing into regions that had been recently the sole domain of the native people who had since been removed to reservations. There was a great deal of unrest and a growing horse theft problem that necessitated the recruitment of more mounted police officers. Reports of violent skirmishes appeared regularly in Canadian newspapers. Indeed, in July 1882, at Fort Macleod in Alberta's south, 3 mounted policemen were shot and killed as they attempted to arrest some suspected horse thieves. The national outrage that followed brought many eager recruits to the area. I was dead by then. That spring, I had 2 massive send-offs. What a fortunate man, you say. At least I was able to attend and participate in the first of these. On the 1st of May, 1882, as I awaited the westward train that would convey me to my destiny, the mayor of Barrie and a large crowd of my fellow citizens gathered to wish me well. I was lauded, awarded a gold watch and chain, and cheered as I waved goodbye to them all. Auld Lang Syne was playing as the train pulled away from the station. I never made it to my intended destination. By May 12th, I was feeling rather unwell, and my circumstances only got worse as the days went on. On the 18th of May, at Prince Arthur's Landing, now part of Thunder Bay, I breathed my last, succumbing to a strangulated hernia, so the doctor said. Then began my eastward journey, back to my beloved Barrie, a town that I did not expect to see so soon again. The crowds gathered at the station once more to receive my lifeless body. My soldier's spirit was warmed by the care put into my funeral arrangements. I lay in state in the battalion drill shed, and was then brought to Barrie Union Cemetery to rest, having received full military honors. After my family and friends went home, and the musicians packed away their instruments, I was left alone in this quiet place, with the sounds of rifle volleys still echoing in my ears. How I would enjoy holding a rifle in my hands just one more time, and let out a great crackling shot. I imagine that would wake up my neighbors, now wouldn't it?
Mausoleums are such intriguing graves, don't you think? Those that you see around the grounds belong to once well-to-do or prominent families. This one belongs to Mr. Henry Bird. He was a boot and shoe dealer on Dunlop Street until he became the town clerk in 1874. This was the fine resting place built for his wife, Elizabeth, who died the year before he moved into his grand new home on the bay called Ingleside. When Mr. Bird later died out in British Columbia, his body was brought back to Barrie to be entombed here with his late wife. I think the mausoleums are rather stately, but some folks get the morbs or shudder at the sight of these family tombs, as if there's something sinister lurking in them. Wait. Shh. Did you hear something?
Hold on, you. Stop right there. Shouldn't you be in school? I have a good mind to report you to the truant officer. Why, I should really... Oh, mercy me, my apologies. I was a school teacher for a long, long time, and the habits that come with that profession are hard to break. Many years I've spent in this cemetery, buried without my glasses, I would add, and everyone looks so much younger to me than they actually are. I can see now that you are not a child, but a visitor come to see me. I wouldn't blame you at all if you walked on by, as you haven't received the best of welcomes. Of course, if you want to stay and chat for a moment, I would be honored. I have been here since 1956, which is not nearly as long as many of my neighbors. My life spanned 98 years, with my entire family waiting patiently here for me until my arrival, some waiting much longer than others. In 1888, when I was 30 years old, typhoid made its way into the family home and threatened the lives of all of us, my parents, my 4 siblings, and myself. Ida and the twins, Fred and Millie, became very ill, and sadly, the twins did not recover. Of course, I cannot say why I was spared for so long, but I want to believe that I was meant to contribute positively to the community, and the segment of the community that I was called to was the children. One day, when I was 17 years old, I filled in for a sick teacher upon the recommendation of my father, who was on the school board at the time. More supply roles followed, and I was then hired to teach full-time. I spent 23 years instructing the senior students at the Central School on Collier Street, and then 15 years at the West Ward School on Bradford Street, teaching the primary children. I retired in 1917. Can you believe it? The idea of spending my days in a rocking chair on the front porch was unappealing, and I believed I had much more to do. First, Fanny, my sister and constant companion, and I took a long dreamed-about trip to New Zealand to visit our ailing brother Charles, whom we had not seen for decades. Once home again, I returned to the classrooms of Simcoe County, this time as a volunteer lecturer. The schools of our region well imparted the basics of a solid education, but I felt that more skills could be learned that would keep the students on the successful path that they had been placed upon. I was a supporter of the temperance movement, and most people agreed that drinking was a harmful vice. However, in the 1920s, very few regarded tobacco smoking as anything other than a benign pastime. I thought otherwise and brought anti-smoking talks to the local schools. Oh, come on now. I know what you're thinking. Please don't picture me as some kind of spinster schoolmarm marching around with a "Repent" placard, because I assure you I was not one of those. I simply wanted the little children to thrive well beyond their school days. I am very proud of something else. The fact that I was the first ever female to be a member of the Barrie Public Library Board. Immediately, I saw opportunities for learning in this environment as well, and I started the Children's Story Hour, which continued long after my tenure there. Did you know that I could sing? I was a contralto in both the church choir and a local quartet, something that brought great joy to me. Sooner or later, we all slowed down. In time, I gave up my many projects and contented myself with long walks, lots of reading, and engaging in the now dying art of letter writing. This I continued until my 95th birthday had come and gone, after which the inevitabilities of old age began to restrict me. For 3 years, I lived entirely in my bedroom at 13 Point Street, which had been my family home through many happy years, and it was there that I passed away on December 18th, 1956. I had a good and very full life, and I was ready to join my family again. Thanks so much for dropping by. Have a lovely day, and remember, just say no to alcohol and tobacco.
It's a good thing that I noticed your arrival just now. I was about to take a stroll around the neighborhood, and I would likely have missed your visit. Sometimes I walk all the way to my former home at 105 Sunnydale Road. It's not that far, not even a mile away. So then, what brings you here? I will tell you what has brought me here. It was an undertaker, a carriage, and a nice team of black horses. My word! I hope you don't mind my dark sense of humor. It gets a little dull around here, and I have to amuse myself somehow. Yes, I've been a resident of this place for quite some time, since 1892. How many years is that? Never mind, don't tell me. It's been a long, long time, that much I know. When I died, I was 60 years old. You folks nowadays think that's midlife, but in 1892 it was considered old age, so passing at that age was not uncommon. At the time of my birth in 1832, my life expectancy was less than 40 years old, so I did alright, I suppose. I was born in Ireland. Did you know that? Well, you probably would never have guessed it, as I lack the telltale accent of the Emerald Isle people. You see, I was born just before my parents, William and Agnes Carson, decided to step onto a sailing ship and endure a voyage of several weeks to reach this land. The ocean voyage, as arduous as it was, might have been the easy part, as travel across Upper Canada was absolutely brutal in the 1830s, in almost every season. When we arrived in the village of Barrie, we dropped our bags at the foot of Bayfield Street and decided that we could not go one single more step. On a little hill, just a bump in the landscape really, my father constructed a shanty, and there we remained for quite a while. After having our fill of waterfront property living, my father decided that we should engage in farming. To that end, we relocated to the 6th concession of Vespera, just outside of Barrie. In 1855, I married Maria Brown, and we moved into the center of Barrie soon after. We lived simply in a small house, not too far from the boot and shoe business that I operated on Bayfield Street near the 5 Points. In those days, we were hoping to organize a primitive Methodist congregation, and our small home often served as a meeting place before a church could be built. If you had all day to sit with me here, I could regale you with endless stories about the dozen or so years that I acted as the first town constable, vagrants, drunkards, and men with unsound minds that were constant companions. And together, we wore a path from downtown area up to the limestone jailhouse looming over Mulcaster Street. I was punched, cursed out, chased, and regularly insulted, although most of the latter indignities came from my own employer, the Barrie Town Council, who suggested that I was no more than a charity case, a disabled pensioner. Despite their opinion, I was somehow able to quiet brawls at houses of ill fame and to twist the ears of many a liquor-filled young bucks all on my own. Of course, by then, my family and I had taken up residence at what is now 105 Sunnydale Road. It is situated in the most suburban of areas today, but it was once our farmhouse and a delightful sanctuary away from the troubles of the wider world. That brings me to my demise. Stomach cancer was slowly undermining my constitution, and like many persons of the male type, I ignored my symptoms and avoided the doctor. Not that any medical treatment available in 1892 would have prevented my death. The Grim Reaper came calling on the 8th of July, and I was not necessarily opposed to following him at that point, if you understand what I mean. 2 days later, I left my home for the last time and began my long rest here. Take care, my friend, and don't be a stranger at your physician's office.
Have you heard of zinkers? In the late 1800s until about 1914, stone for headstones was expensive, so zinc grave markers became popular. These hollow gravestones, which you could order by mail, had panels that could be unscrewed and pulled out, making them handy hiding places for money and alcohol during Prohibition. The zinkers were sometimes advertised as white bronze. It made them seem more elegant, I suppose. They certainly cost much less than stone monuments, and they stood up better to the weather. World War I came along, and the companies making zinkers changed to producing munitions. After the war, the demand for zinc markers faded away. You can spot these beautifully detailed markers by their bluish-gray color and smooth surface that's different from stone. When you knock on them, you'll know you've found a zinker.
Well, hello there. Pleased to meet you. My name is Robert Simpson, and I am dead. Don't look so shocked. Naturally, I am dead, and my passing should come as no surprise, as I was born in the year 1817. Your condolences are appreciated, but completely unnecessary, as I was well eulogized and mourned at the time of my death in April of 1891. The flowers and accolades at my funeral were many, and a very fine monument stands above my grave at Barrie Union Cemetery. I recommend that you examine it yourself, if you have the time. I left this world 1 week after entering my 75th year of life. That, to me, is an excellent lifespan, and I can assure you that I packed a great deal of living into the time I was allotted on Earth. My beginnings were humble. My father was a shepherd who spent his life walking the hills near Salton, a village in northeastern Yorkshire, England. Nearby towns include Scarborough, Whitby, and Malton, which leads me to think that I must not have been the only Yorkshireman to venture away and land in Upper Canada. At 18 years of age, a young man is looking for two things: to break away from his father's way of living and to seek adventure. At least this was true of my case. A life of shepherding is an honest life, but I wanted more for myself, and I boarded the first ship available and sailed away to Canada. Oh, what a land I found! Upper Canada was in a state of upheaval with political disagreements that soon led to a bloody rebellion, forced relocation of Indian people, land-related grievances involving loyalists and new immigrants, and troubles with the economy, churches, schools, and more. Of course, these were simply the growing pains of a new country. I made my way to the village of Newmarket, some 33 miles north of Toronto, as that was about as far as you could travel in those days. This village of some 600 souls had grown around a mill pond, and by the time I arrived there, it had acquired several churches, taverns, shops, and a post office. 2 breweries existed, and I found some employment for myself at one, and was soon on my way to learning a very useful trade. With my newfound skills, I decided to set myself up in business elsewhere, preferably at some emerging town, yet without a brewer of beers and ales. Kempenfelt, it was called. What an unusual name for a village! I had noticed some advertisements extolling the positive aspects of this up-and-coming community. Land was being sold at fairly reasonable prices, and there were opportunities to be had for men like myself who wished to relocate to Kempenfelt and establish businesses there. Travel was still quite problematic. Either you were conveyed by boat along the winding and shallow Holland River, or you took your chances with a stagecoach over muddy trails that passed for roads. In either case, you would land exhausted on the shore of Lake Simcoe and be removed to Kempenfelt by way of the bay that bears the same name. As you have no doubt guessed, I did arrive safely on the north shore of Kempenfelt Bay. I started to work immediately and set up a fine little brewery for myself. The customers did patronize my business, and I imagined that my small venture would surely grow with time. But something unexpected happened. Kempenfelt began to decline as the village of Barrie, just to the west of us, began to expand. For a time I thought both places could coexist, but it was not to be. As I pondered my future in Kempenfelt, fate made my decision for me. The brewery burned down, and I took the opportunity to begin afresh once again. 1841 was a good year for a new start. I crossed Kempenfelt Bay and set up a new brewery on the southern shore, and within a short while, I married my beloved wife Sarah Ann Souls. Together we welcomed a son we called Thomas, and 2 daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. 7 years on, that ever-present foe came calling again, and the brewery that I had so carefully built was reduced to ashes by a fire. My next move was obvious to me. Barrie had become the center of the county, and was then a thriving place with many opportunities. In fact, the good friends I made in that town often suggested that I pull up stakes in Tollendale and relocate to Barrie. Finished were the days of doing business in a small way, operating out of a wood-sided brewery and accepting moderate success. Once I made up my mind to establish a brewery in Barrie, I was determined to be the proprietor of the biggest and best one that the townsfolk had ever seen. If I may boast, it did not take me long to erect the Simcoe Steam Brewery on Mary Street that quickly became a local landmark. For my family, I had a beautiful home constructed on the same street. When men are as fortunate as I, they should not sit back and admire their riches, but instead look for ways in which they can be of service to the community that welcomed them and supported them along the way. For that reason, I put my name forward for political office and found myself in several different roles over the years. I have been, at times, reeve, deputy reeve, and magistrate, but the greatest honor of them all was to be elected first mayor of Barrie as the community turned the page from village to town. After I arrived in Barrie in 1848, I made it my home ever afterwards. Once you find the ideal place that suits you, you will never have any reason to leave it.
Are you wondering yet how I know so much about the business of death? Well, I didn't start out thinking about dying and burials. I was Wilhelmina Purvis, just an ordinary farm girl born in Innisfil in 1886. When I was 18, I married William Minikin of Vesper Township, although his family had once lived out our way for many years. We were wed in Christ Church on the 7th concession, not far from here, on the most perfect day in June. My husband Bill worked in construction and had many contracts and buildings about town. In 1915, he purchased an undertaking parlor, which is how I became to be introduced to such sad, somber work. The funeral parlor was in our home and a constant part of our lives, so it was natural to become acquainted with the particulars of death. Many undertakers take to the drink, and who could blame them, dealing with such awful business day in and out? But my Bill never touched a drop. My husband helped many of the souls who rest here make their final journey. And my journey to Barrie Union Cemetery? As restful as this place is, I would have preferred to have stayed away from it a bit longer. I died as a result of a diabetic coma at the age of 49 in 1937 and was waked in my own home. This is my home now, marked by this lovely granite headstone. Not everyone who rests in the cemetery has one, so I think myself very fortunate that folks like yourself can easily find me. And so many of the other interesting souls here that might appreciate a visit or two. On you go then. But you know where I am now, and you're welcome back any time.